The story of how Hitler's own generals secretly tried to save Germany is one of the most intense parts of the entire war, because the truth is, many of the men around him knew long before the end that Germany was doomed, and they weren't loyal warriors following their leader into destiny. Many of them were quietly planning, warning, hesitating, sabotaging, and in some cases, plotting to remove him without him ever realizing how close he was to losing control of his own command. It didn't start in 1944 with the bomb plot. It started years earlier, long before most people realize. Because behind the scenes of every German victory, there were generals whispering among themselves that Hitler was dragging the country toward a disaster they could already see forming men like Ludwig Beck, Franz Halder, Erwin von Witzleben, and later Rommel were turning into reluctant rebels, not because they hated the regime, but because they believed Hitler's decisions would eventually destroy the entire country. The first moment the generals really panicked was the decision to invade Czechoslovakia in 1938. Hitler was determined. The generals were horrified. They knew Czechoslovakia had some of the strongest defenses in Europe. They believed Germany wasn't ready. They were convinced Hitler would lead Germany into a catastrophe. And for the first time, a group of high-ranking officers began planning something unthinkable, stopping him from inside his own command. They held secret meetings. They discussed detaining him. Some even considered removing him permanently. But then something happened that none of them expected. The British and French caved at Munich, giving Hitler everything he wanted without a fight. In that moment, the general's plan collapsed. Hitler came home a hero. The German people worshipped him, and the generals realized they had missed their chance. The one moment where they had the leverage to save Germany slipped away. Hitler believed this victory proved he was a genius. The generals believed it proved something else. They were losing control over him. When the war began in 1939, most generals had already accepted that war was coming, but they still hoped it would be short. They hoped Hitler would negotiate after Poland. They hoped he would stop while Germany was still strong. But Hitler had no intention of stopping, and with every victory he trusted his generals less. During the invasion of France in 1940, the generals knew how risky the entire plan was. The plan wasn't even Hitler's idea. It came from General von Manstein. Hitler didn't even like it at first. But when it worked, Hitler convinced himself he had masterminded the entire operation. He believed his intuition was superior to every trained officer in the military. The generals watched his confidence turn into arrogance, and the fear began to grow behind the scenes. If this man thinks he's always right, who will stop him when he's wrong? That moment came in 1941 with the decision to attack the Soviet Union. This was the breaking point. Almost every senior general warned him it was too big, too risky, too unrealistic. They tried to reason with him. They showed him logistics reports. They explained the distances, the supply problems, the winter conditions. Hitler ignored all of it. He believed the Soviet Union would collapse in weeks. He believed the Red Army was weak. He believed he could beat one of the largest nations on earth with the same intuition that had worked in the past. The generals knew this was the moment Germany crossed a line it could never return from. Many started secretly documenting their concerns. Some began conversations with diplomats. Others quietly prepared plans in case Hitler eventually lost control. But still, no one dared confront him openly. His popularity was too high. The fear was too real. As the Eastern Campaign began, the truth hit them harder than any Soviet counterattack. The Red Army wasn't collapsing. The German supply system was failing, and Hitler refused to allow his forces to retreat or adapt. Every time a general asked for permission to withdraw to a safer line, Hitler denied it. Every time they tried to save their troops, Hitler insisted they hold positions that were impossible to defend. And slowly, the generals realized that the biggest danger to Germany wasn't the enemy. It was the man giving the orders. In the winter of 1941, when the Red Army launched its massive counterattack, the generals finally confronted him. They begged him to allow a strategic retreat. They told him the front would collapse. Hitler refused. He even dismissed generals who dared question him. He said standing firm was the only option. The generals knew they were watching a disaster unfold in slow motion, and they knew he would blame them for everything that went wrong. By 1942 and 1943, the attempts to save Germany became bolder. Generals sabotaged orders, they delayed decisions, they softened commands. Some quietly helped small retreats happen without Hitler realizing. Others tried to minimize losses by hiding the true number of withdrawn units. They knew that if he discovered any of this, they'd be removed instantly, but they did it anyway, because by now many of them believed Germany's only hope was that they, not Hitler, steered the war strategy. One of the most dramatic examples happened at Stalingrad. General Paulus begged Hitler to allow him to break out. The entire Sixth Army begged, the generals in Berlin begged on his behalf. Hitler refused again, and the generals watched powerless as one of the largest forces Germany had ever put into the field was slowly trapped, surrounded, and eventually erased. It was the moment many officers reached a horrifying conclusion. Hitler wasn't saving Germany, he was destroying it. This was when the secret resistance inside the military truly formed. Beck, Stauffenberg, Tresckow, Witzleben, they all began coordinating attempts to remove him. They believed it was the only way to negotiate peace before Germany was completely defeated. But even inside this resistance, there was chaos. Some wanted a government run by generals. Others wanted a return to democracy. Others simply wanted the war to end before Germany was wiped off the map. They all shared one thing. They believed Hitler had to be removed for the country to survive. The assassination attempts began. Some were small, some were bold, some came unbelievably close. Tresckow once planted a device on Hitler's plane, but the device failed to detonate because of the cold. Another officer planned to detonate an explosive in his coat during a meeting, but the pressure of the moment overwhelmed him. Time after time, the generals were inches away from ending the war early, and time after time, something went wrong. Either fate interfered, or they hesitated, or Hitler changed his schedule at the last second. But the most famous attempt came in July 1944, the moment Stauffenberg placed the device under the table at the Wolf's Lair. It was the last desperate attempt to save Germany, while there was still a chance. Stauffenberg believed that if Hitler fell, the generals could take over the government instantly, declare emergency authority, protect civilians, and negotiate an end to the war before the country collapsed entirely. He placed the device. He walked out of the room. The device went off. The building shook. Men were thrown into the air. Smoke filled the bunker. And for a moment, it looked like the war might end right there. But it didn't. A table leg deflected the blast just enough to save Hitler. The attempt failed, and the retaliation began instantly. Generals were arrested, families were taken. The resistance was crushed, and with it, the last chance to stop the destruction of Germany. After the failed plot, Hitler no longer trusted anyone. He micromanaged every detail. He issued orders that defied reality. He moved divisions that no longer existed on paper. He demanded units to stand firm even when they were surrounded with no supplies. The generals who remained weren't allowed to save Germany anymore. They were ordered to obey until the end, even when the end was unavoidable. By the time the Allies were closing in from both sides in 1945, the generals weren't planning resistance anymore. They were planning surrender. Some surrendered their units early to save as many men as they could. Others refused to follow orders they believed would cause pointless destruction. In the final days, many generals were openly ignoring Hitler's commands, focusing instead on protecting civilians, evacuating cities, and preventing more damage. The truth is this: For years, many of Hitler's own generals knew Germany was heading toward total ruin. They tried to warn him, they tried to guide him, they tried to fix his strategic mistakes. They plotted, they resisted, they sabotaged, they planned to remove him, and they came closer than most people realize. But in the end, nothing worked. Because the generals were divided, the timing was always off, and Hitler was protected by fear, loyalty, and the illusion of success that kept him in power far longer than his generals believed was safe. Germany wasn't destroyed because the generals didn't see the danger. It was destroyed because they couldn't stop the man who refused to listen to them.